The next thing we're going to talk about is going to be our first game experience. Quinn, you thought of this idea, so I'm going to let you take the reins of this one.
Okay, so I'm going to start off first what my first video game experience was. So I'm the youngest out of all the
He's the baby.
Yeah.
I'm only 19 years old, so people...
I turned 22 next month.
A lot of people might see me as the young punk or whatever.
As the youngling.
Well, he's not much younger than you.
19 and 22, that's a kind of a big gap.
I'm 31.
Yeah, well. There's a lot of... That's why I like this panel, because we have all the different experiences of video games.
All right,
yes.
But continue.
So my first video game experience, I wasn't quite sure. I would assume like my first video game experience, because my stepdad was really into video games. My mom wasn't really into video games. She liked books a lot and television shows, and I like television shows too. Like, I mean, if you said, "Oh, I don't like TV," that'd be very questionable. So I would always go. I think this would probably be my first video game experience, but this isn't like for sure. I think with like my first experience would probably be at like have you guys been to Old School Pizzeria before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know how they have like arcade machines.
That little
sit
down tabletop thing? Yeah, I want to have one of those.
I think that might be because I would always go down there to eat. But my first console that I remember clearly having and like video games was actually my mom didn't expect me to like video games at all. The reason she bought it was because we were going to New York for a week or so in the summer, and she was like, I don't know how he's gonna handle me on the flight. Like, I don't want him crying the whole time and like making a big fuss and kicking people's back of their seats or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was in my mom's car, and she worked at Fred Meyer at the time, and she was like, all right, Quinn, I'm gonna stay here. I'm going to get you a present. Just tell me what color you want. And she had a magazine in the car. And so when I was looking at the magazine, on the first cover, I saw teddy bears. So I was like, I'm going to get a teddy bear and I can choose whatever color I want. That's cool. And my favorite color is red. So I was like, I want a red one. And she was like, okay. I was like, man, I'm going to get a red teddy bear today. It's going to be the coolest thing in the world. And she comes back.
How old are you at this point?
I am 6 or 7.
Oh, okay. All right.
It was first grade. I'm pretty sure it was first grade, or the summer before first grade, or the summer leading to second grade. Okay. I'm not entirely certain which one it is. And she comes back, and she's like, "All right, here you go." And I like if I was not potty trained at that point in time, let me tell you. Oh my gosh. So I got a red Game Boy Advance. And my mom knew that back then I was the king of games. And by that, I mean I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! So much. Jeez. And she got me Yu-Gi-Oh! World Tournament Edition 2003 or whatever. So yeah. I would be 6. So yeah, it would have been the summer before first grade.
I was in 3rd grade at that point.
And
when? 2006?
2003.
I was a senior in high school.
So back when I was a little baby Quinn.
Baby Quinn.
And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I remember she drove me home and we were unpacking it. And this was my first like own handheld sort of like console sort of thing. So I was just figuring out like, oh, so at this point in time, I think, at least for me, I didn't quite understand rechargeable because I knew consoles, you plug them in. But at this time, like handhelds were mostly, you get batteries.
The AA's, yeah.
You throw them out.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
We all do it.
Yeah.
We're going to be eco-friendly here.
Everyone does.
So it was actually very fortunate for me because because I got the SP, not the Advance, the original Advance.
Oh, so you got the Game Boy Advance SP?
Yes.
Okay, all right, all right.
Which was very fortunate for me.
That was your first console?
Yeah.
Oof.
And I remember it because my mom bought it because it was on sale, since she was always keen on sales since she worked at Fred Meyer. So it was like $80 or $90, which is the price of a 2DS now, which is weird to think about.
Yeah. It's a good price for it.
And I got Yu-Gi-Oh! And I couldn't figure out how to play that game. I just couldn't do it. And so So my mom, we went to Blockbuster, and if you guys don't know what Blockbuster is, it's a place where you'd go. This is weird sounding because I'm still young.
Yeah.
But it has ceased to exist. It's like a red box, but you actually go physically there inside this building, and you can choose out your movies and you rent them for a little bit, and then you return them. Or video games. You could do either or, whatever, and then there's snacks there.
Don't forget the snacks.
Yeah, don't forget the snacks.
You know, my
That's a
mom
big-
always said, I would ask her, I'd be like, can we get the milk dud? No, they're $4.
Yeah.
We can go to the store and buy them for $1.
Yeah.
Actually, when my favorite time, it was like both a heartbreaking but nice time, was when they were like losing all their money because Redbox, Netflix,
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
Blockbuster, I think, was the last one to go.
Yeah,
I
it
believe
was.
it was.
Yeah, Hollywood Video.
Hollywood
went
Video was
out.
gone sooner.
Yeah, before that.
They,
Rest in peace, Game Crazy.
I will always remember them. They had deals constantly where like rent 2 movies and you get bucket popcorn, candy,
Oh,
blah blah
that's
blah
right,
for
that's
free
right, they did
and
that,
whatever.
yeah.
Because they're trying to get people to keep coming in
Yeah.
nowadays because it was so much more convenient just to stay home or go to Redbox because Redbox was like $1.
Yeah, and then as soon as Netflix kicked in, it was that
just-
was the nail in the coffin right there.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. So I went there and this just so happened to be before our trip or whatever, and I saw this game on the shelf or whatever, which is really weird. It wasn't like a rent game, it was like a buy game, and I don't know,
Like when they would sell their pre-owned.
Yeah.
They're old, you know, we used to rent games.
and I didn't know like who sold this or like it was just sitting there for a while, but it was Star Wars for the Game Boy, like the original Game Boy, but because the Game Boy Advance SP was backwards compatible, which by the
you
way,
hear that? Backwards compatible.
I had no idea what backwards compatible is, but just because I saw a Game Boy on it, and
Well, at the time we didn't think about it. It was,
Yeah,
it was just a
like-
thing that was in
I was just
consoles.
like, Game Boy? I got a Game Boy. Shoot, I'll buy it. It's a weird like shape and whatever, but yeah, I'll get it. And I didn't understand I didn't understand any of that. So I got it, and because I love Star Wars. Star Wars is great. I played it, and it was a port of Star Wars for the NES. Yeah, it was
the
NES.
side scroller where you
Yeah.
start off in Hoth.
No, it was a side scroller. I believe the Hoth one is Super
It's a
Star Wars.
super-
Yeah.
yeah, it's a Super,
So this
that's
one
right.
was just the regular NES one. And if you guys know who Angry Video Game Nerd is, he actually covered it in one of his episodes of Star Wars games. And so I got stuck with these 2 games on my flight to
Kentucky.
no, not in Kentucky.
Good
to,
callback.
I don't remember.
To New York.
New York, that's right.
And so I think since I didn't know how to play the Yu-Gi-Oh game, that game was out the window. I was like, I am done with this game. I love Yu-Gi-Oh, but man, I don't. What do you even do? So I couldn't figure that out. And then so I was stuck with Star Wars. And oh my God, the AVGN episode covers it pretty well. That this game is hard. It is so hard for like a little 6-year-old Quinn or whatever to be playing this game. It was so hard. Like, okay, there's a part where you are supposed to like meet. Okay, it's kind of like Zelda in the beginning. So you play as Luke Skywalker. You got a blaster, and or you don't even have the blaster at first, I don't think. But you go into a random cave, and then in the random cave, you get the blaster or you meet Obi-Wan and he gives you blaster, sort of like Legend of Zelda, where the old man
Yeah.
gives you the
Oh,
sword.
I
or
remember that part in the movie.
Yeah.
and he's like, Luke, use the Force or whatever, and blah blah blah. And then so you're going through like a sand crawler or something, and then you're supposed to meet up with Han Solo, and you fly the Millennium Falcon. But if you go fly the Millennium Falcon, there's like a mini game where you have to shoot asteroids or whatever. But I didn't know this as a kid. The game doesn't tell you because it's a port of an NES game, and they very limited like dialogue and blah blah blah. So I just go in space, die, game over, and then you hear like Darth Vader breathing or something like that. I don't remember. And I was like, what the heck? And since either I didn't know how to save or this is just how the game worked, I would start at the beginning. So I'd have to go in the cave. I'd have to get a blaster. I'd have to do all this. And
You got really good at the game though at that point.
Yes. Well, at that point, but I didn't. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get these shield things that are around this area in order to give it to the Millennium Falcon so that you have shields to withstand the asteroids. Then you can do it. But I didn't know
Kind
that.
of like Mass Effect.
Yeah.
And so, that was
That's your first.
that was
gaming
my
memory?
experience. So I pretty much stopped playing my Game Boy Advance for the rest of the trip, and I just ended up hanging out in New York, which was fun.
Nice.
Man.
I'm gonna go over to this side. Back in
Alright.
your time,
Back in my time.
when
All right.
wagons were being pulled by oxes.
All right. So my first experience with consoles was back in 1989. I want to say 89. It was 1989. I was 5 years old, and we were living in this little ski resort town at the base of a ski mountain. There's like 6 feet of snow outside. We couldn't really open up the door type of snow. Like I had a tree.
When you open up the door, it's the imprint of the door.
We shoveled it out, but like when you'd open the door, it's just snow.
Yeah.
Like, the
Holy
walkway out.
Yeah.
And like I even had a tree for it up in the tree that was like 20 feet up there. And I remember in the winters, I would just jump out of it and just poof, right on in. And that year we were there. The year that we were there, I got a Pittsburgh Steelers football uniform, helmet and everything, and we got the original NES. And I remember
Quite a combination of things.
well,
there.
I remember getting the uniform, right, and I was like, I was so excited. And I remember putting it on, and then my neighbor across the street got a Dallas Cowboys uniform.
Oh wow.
And so like we met up.
Two teams that didn't make it.
Hey, this was back in the
Hey, yeah.
And then so we went outside in like this 4 or 5 feet of snow, just in these little uniforms with little pads and a shirt and shorts, like no snow clothes, no nothing. And we're just out there. We're not even playing football. We're just tackling each other.
There's no ball. They're just
no,
tackling each other for no reason.
Yeah, we're just tackling each other. And I didn't know that we had gotten the NES. I just saw my uniform and like lost my mind.
Yeah.
And
How
so,
old are you at this?
I think I was like 5. I was 5.
Okay. All right.
I was right. It was right before we moved back. We were in Idaho, and it was right before we moved back to Washington. And so I was 5. I was 5. I was 5. 4 at the earliest, but I was 5. I'm pretty sure I was 5.
Okay.
I walked in, and there's my brother playing Super Mario Brothers, and I'm like, helmet off, threw it over there, and I just sit next to it, and I'm like this. I'm like,
Yeah.
And it was we just had Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and
Oh, yeah, the
combo.
combo
It was-
cartridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't think I ever beat it, ever. I don't think I've ever beaten the first Mario game, but I just remember doing all the warps as best as I could. And I remember, like, there are pictures of me sitting in front of the TV, like, this close to the TV, in my Steelers outfit, pads and everything, no helmet, just, like this, or, like, with the gun pressed up against the screen, because I was one of those little kids, you know?
Yeah.
my
For
God.
Duck Hunt.
Yeah, and I actually kind of want to find those pictures now, because I'm sitting there in Steelers outfit, black top, yellow pants, and I'm just like, yeah, that was it for me. Like that whole thing just
That's
changed.
awesome.
That changed my life.
That was pretty cool.
That was one of the
You know,
most exciting things that I've ever had happen.
It's funny that you say you were like 5.
I was
or
like
4 or
5.
5,
I
and
was
then
4 or
you
5.
said you were 6, because mine is probably 4 or 5. Is when I got my first console.
So
I
we were
guess
all
that was,
young and
yeah. But it's weird how we kind of remembered at the same time frame of
Yeah,
our
because I
lives.
don't remember much of anything else being
Yeah.
that old. I remember preschool and kindergarten.
I don't think I went to preschool.
and I remember going to the local. We didn't have a Hollywood Video or a Blockbuster. It was
Really?
like some.
We had Joe's
No.
shack over around
No,
the
like
corner.
we lived literally in. It was a town basically set up to support the ski resort mountain. We lived at the base of, I
It
believe.
was like Sun Valley.
No. We lived at the base, I think, of Schweitzer Mountain in Idaho.
Yeah, Sun Valley's in Idaho.
And the local movie game rental place was just this little place about the size of my apartment. And I remember going there and like renting like Excite Bike. And this was back like when I didn't even know like what these games were. I didn't know that like Excite Bike
there was no IGN.
Yeah, like I didn't know like any of these games were like any good or anything like that. But I remember
Cool box art.
No, yeah, like I remember renting all of these games that were just so bad. Like I remember renting like this one where it's like the space shuttle and you're supposed to like fly it off into space, but like I never could. It would always explode, and I couldn't figure it out. And I remember playing like Zelda and just getting lost, and I still don't know where to go in the first Zelda.
It's anything. Do anything you want.
And yeah, I finally with the NES Classic, I finally found where the first dungeon is.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Progress. 30 years later.
It's dangerous out there. Take this.
Yeah, no, I find you go up and there's a tree on the island. That's the first one. Sweet.
Yeah, there you go.
30 years later, I actually made progress,
There you
go. But yeah, it was exciting. It was
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how else to describe it other than it was awesome. I remember just Excite Bike. That's all I wanted to rent. Was just Excite Bike.
Excite Bike is on the
That
NES.
is
I
a
know.
fun game.
I know. I've played it.
Yeah, my first experience was around 4 or 5. I got the Game Boy Color was my first game console that I had. I had Pokemon Yellow, and I had no idea why my parents decided to buy me Pokemon stuff, but this was the start of a beautiful friendship at this point. I remember a specific event where when I was living in Idaho, we had a 2-story house in Nampa, and so I remember being in our spare bedroom, and I was like how a teenage girl lays down reading a magazine.
Yeah, with your legs up, kicking behind you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I like that was the position I was in playing Pokemon Yellow, and I named my character Ash because the show had just started. And so
you were going meta from the start.
Yeah, and because Pokemon Yellow, you start with Pikachu.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this is Ash. This is who this is. This is how all Pokemon games are. They're supposed to be like the whole entire show.
Yeah.
So
I am not afraid to admit that the very first time I played The Legend of Zelda, I named Link Zelda.
Oh man.
Comment
section below, right down here.
Actually, there's quite a bit of Zelda games where you get secrets for naming your character Zelda.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in Zelda, what was the one for the CD? You do play as Zelda.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's the Faces
The
of
Phillips one or
the
whatever?
Faces of Evil and the Wand of Gamelon, and then there's a third one, and those are all bad games.
But you do play as Zelda.
But you do play as
so
Zelda
there you
in
go.
2 out of the 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so sorry to interrupt, but yeah, when you're saying you were naming your character's actual name, that reminded me.
Yeah.
Growing up, I never called Link until Ocarina of Time.
Well, they don't tell you that his name's that.
No, I had no idea. A 5-year-old.
That's a meta thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I remember playing Pokemon Yellow and going over to my next door neighbor's house, and we would trade Pokemon. We had the link cables, which were these cables that you would connect to the Game Boy Color, and to connect to the Game Boy Color, you can also connect it to the Game Boy Advance, which I had as well. And I remember going to my my babysitter's house, and she had kids too, so I would hang out with them, and he had a Game Boy, and so I looked at his Game Boy and I looked at my Game Boy Color, and I'm like, what the heck are these? These are two totally different things. They played the games, they played them fine. There's just one was in black and white, one was in color, but that was, you would see this big Duke of a console.
Oh, so he had like the original.
A Game Boy, and I had the Game Boy Color.
That's what my brother had growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had the old gray brick that's like that.
I had the Game Boy Color. I had it in purple, and I had the Worm Light with it. The Worm Light, the Game Boy Color didn't have a built-in backlight, so you had to buy this accessory that would attach to the side of it. and it would take up about a quarter of your screen because it was lighting up. So I even remember when we were driving on the freeway and you'd go underneath tunnels, and you'd just have to I'd be playing and all of a sudden tunnels coming up. I'm like, oh. It's all dark. All right, we're out of the tunnel. Okay, I can play again because now I can see. Like there was these elements of the Game Boy Color that you don't obviously have now, which is a good thing in some ways. But yeah, I remember playing that, and I remember my dad would beat Pokemon Yellow so I could have all the Pokemon, and I'd have them all at a good level.
God.
But then I would take it and I would restart and like play again because I was like, no, you ruined it, and then I'd play it again, and then he would go and beat it again. But my first console was the N64, which I got around the same time. I got the Pikachu edition bundle that had Pokemon Stadium and Hey You. I think it had both. I think it had Hey You Pikachu and Pokemon Stadium with the Pikachu edition Nintendo 64, which I still have to this day. I still have my Game Boy too. But it's crazy how I've asked them, why did you buy this console? Just out of curiosity of why you chose this one and not the console that everyone else got.
The standard one.
Yeah. They just felt like I was watching the show and I liked it and they bought it. And I was like, that's why those people are awesome.
I think it was a show that had like good games tied to it, not like you weren't watching I don't know, a bad show right now from the 90s off the time. Like if you were watching like,
hey, those CartoonNetwork.com games were awesome. So, like, do you remember those games?
Yeah.
I actually played them a lot as a kid.
All those Flash games. Yeah. But yeah, it was different time. Games are not the way they are now.
Actually, it's funny when you talked about the link cable thing. My first experience with the link cable, because the Game Boy Advance, I don't think any of the Game Boys came with the link cable. You had to buy it on your own.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't like, I didn't comprehend as a kid, because all the time when I played consoles, I always envisioned handhelds as actual console, like a portable console.
Oh yeah, I consider it a Game Boy console.
But so to me, like I was so used to when I'd go to my friends, my downstairs neighbors, when I lived in the apartments at a different apartment. He had like the SNES, he had the Saturn, he had the GameCube, all these other consoles that I didn't have because he normally just got them from like garage sales, so they're really cheap. So I was just used to plugging in my controller and we'd play together. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Game Boy, I didn't understand like, well, how do you do this? So my thing was like, I went to one of my friend's house and he had 2 Game Boy Colors, I believe, and he had I had yellow version and he had red or blue or something. Mm-hmm. And they still can connect because it's like emerald.
Yeah, those 3 can connect.
Whatever. And so I was like, my impression was I didn't understand how you connected. So I thought as soon as you like connect cables, right, that you would be transported to each other's worlds. So as I would walk around, he would be in my game too. Yeah, so I was like, I'll meet you in Pewter City. We'll meet
you were way ahead of time on that one.
That's just how I imagined things as a kid.
Not how it worked.
And I was like, are you here? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, go to the museum. Let's go to the museum. I'll meet you there. So we go to the museum. And every time
how long did it take for you to figure out that you had to go to the Pokemon Center to actually do something?
Till Sapphire version.
Okay, so like 4 generations later?
It was well, because I didn't have much time to figure out, and then it was bedtime, so like, okay, I gave up. And so I didn't get able to link cable until this one kid moved in my apartment complex, and he had Emerald version, and I was like, they made more Pokemon games? Like, I had no idea. So I asked my mom that day, I was like, can we go to Game Crazy? And we drove there, and I was trying to look for Emerald version, but Emerald version wasn't there. And so I wanted Ruby because red's my favorite color, but I got Sapphire, which I like Kyogre. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got Sapphire. I usually pick the bluer ones.
And so I came back and I was like, I don't know if this will work, but let's connect. And we connected and I was like, but where do we go? And he's like, oh, you go to the Pokemon Center.
Oh, you knew what was up. You knew what was up.
But he also like he had the regular link cables and then he had for the Game Boy Advance the wireless ones too.
Oh, I had that too, but no one I knew ever had the other one. Like you didn't get a double pack.
I didn't even know they made the wireless ones. And actually, in fact, on the first like sort of releases of Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald, they came with them as like a bonus.
That was how I got mine.
But I went for my birthday to get Emerald version or Leaf Green or Fire Red, and I was like, "Do you guys have the wireless things?" And they're like, "Oh no, you try across the street." And then we tried, and no, I couldn't find it anywhere. Like, I assume at that time it was just because it was old, and but like, because whenever I had consoles or anything, they were very old at the time. Like, I didn't get by the time I was playing Sapphire or doing any of these things, I think the DS had been out for a while, and then it was almost Pokemon Pearl and Diamond were almost out at the same time.
Yeah.
So like no one was playing that game, and so yeah, it was just the times.
Yes, video games date back even before us. So
Before these two, and
Yeah.
and myself.